We've made it to the final story in Antique Fairy Tales. So, let me show you real quick. We've read all of these. The Little Mermaid, the Selfish Giant, the Blue Parrot, the Hippogriff and the Dragon, the Willow Tree, the Paradise of Children, the Angel, Bluebeard, the White Cat, the 5 Wise Words of the Guru, the Steadfast Tin Soldier, the Fisherman and his Wife, Cinderella or the Little Glass Slipper, the Golden-Headed Fish, the Golden Touch, Jack and the Wonderful Beanstalk, the Happy Prince, the One-Footed Fairy, and the last one is Thumbelina. So, wants to finish already. So yeah, get started on that. I'm gonna get some tea really quick. Hopefully the pages don't fly open again. So, Thumbelina. Once upon a time, there was a woman who wished very much to have a very small child, but she did not know where to get one. So she went to an old witch and said to her, I would so very much like to have a small child. Can you tell me where I can get one? Oh, we shall soon be able to manage that, said the witch. Here is a barley corn. It is not the same kind that grows in the farmer's field, or that the chickens get to eat. Put it into a flower pot, and you will see something. Thank you, said the woman, and gave the witch 12 shillings, for that was the price of it. Then she went home and planted the barley corn. Immediately there grew up a large handsome flower, looking like a tulip. The leaves, however, were tightly closed, as though it was still a bud. It is a beautiful flower, said the woman, kissing its red and yellow leaves. But as she kissed it, the flower opened with a bang. It was a real tulip, as could now be seen. But in the middle of the flower, on the green velvety pistils, sat a tiny maiden, delicately and gracefully formed. She was scarcely half a thumb's length high, and therefore she was called Thumbelina. A neat polished walnut shell served Thumbelina for a cradle. Blue velvet leaves were her mattresses, and a rose leaf her blanket. There she slept at night, but in the daytime she played about on the table, where the woman had put a plate with a wreath of flowers round it, the stalks of which stood in water. On this water floated a large tulip leaf, and on this she could sit and row from one side of the plate to another, having 2 white horsehairs for oars. It looked wonderfully pretty. She could sing too, and indeed, so tenderly and prettily as had never been before heard. There's her. A couple of toads. I'm gonna get some tea. Of course, now people are texting me. I'm in the middle of a video, and now of all times, my phone keeps lighting up that I'm getting texts. It's distracting. One night, as she was lying in her pretty bed, an old toad came creeping in through the window, in which there was a broken pane. The toad was a very ugly one, large and wet. It hopped down upon the table, where Thumbelina lay sleeping under the red rose leaf. She would be a pretty wife for my son, said the toad, taking the walnut shell in which Thumbelina was sleeping, and hopping with it through the window, down into the garden. There flowed a great white brook, the margin of which was swampy and marshy, and here lived the toad with her son. He was so ugly and nasty, and looked just like his mother. Croak, croak, creak, crick, crick, crick. was all that he could say as he spied the graceful little girl in a walnut shell. "Don't speak so loud, else you wake her," said the old toad. "She might run away from us, for she is as light as a swan's down. So we will put her on one of the broad leaves of the water lily in the brook. That will be just like an island for her. She is so light and small. She will not be able to run away from there while we are getting ready the stateroom under the marsh where you are to live and keep house." Out in the brook there grew a great many water lilies with broad green leaves, which looked as though they were floating on the water. The leaf which lay farthest off was the largest. To this old toad swam out and laid the walnut shell with Thumbelina upon it. Tiny Thumbelina woke early in the morning, and when she saw where she was, she began to cry very bitterly, for there was water on every side of the great green leaf, and she could not get to land. The old toad was sitting in the marsh, decking out her room with reeds and yellow flowers. It was to be made very pretty for the new daughter-in-law, and then she swam out with her ugly son to the leaf where Thumbelina was. They wanted to fetch her bed, which is to be placed in the bridal chamber before she herself entered it. The old toad bowed low in the water before her and said, "Here you have my son. He will be your husband, and you will live in great splendor down in the marsh." Croak, croak, crick, crick, kicks was all that the son could say, and they took the pretty little bed and swam away with it, leaving Thumbelina sitting alone in the green leaf, crying, for she did not want to live with the nasty old toad or have her ugly son for a husband. The little fishes swimming down in the water had both seen the toad and also heard what she had said, so they put out their heads, for they wanted to see the little girl too. As soon as they saw her, they thought her so pretty that they felt very sorry that she was to go down to the ugly toad. No, that should never be. They assembled together down in the water round the green stalk that held the leaf on which the tiny maiden stood, and with their teeth they gnawed away at the stalk. The leaf floated away down the stream with Thumbelina, far away where the toad could not reach her. Thumbelina sailed by many towns, and the little birds sitting in the bushes saw her and sang, "What a lovely little girl." The leaf went floating away with her farther and farther, and so Thumbelina traveled right out of the country. It's so annoying, I keep getting texts. People need to stop talking to me. A pretty little white butterfly kept fluttering around her, and at last sat down upon the leaf. Thumbelina pleased him, and she was very glad of it, for now the toad could not reach her. It was so beautiful where she was. The sun was shining on the water, making it sparkle like the brightest silver. She took her girdle and tied one end of it round the butterfly, fastening the other end of the ribbon to the leaf. It glided along much quicker now, and she too, for of course she was standing on it. A great cockchafer came flying along, who spied her and immediately clasped his claws round her slender waist, and flew up with her into a tree. The green leaf floated down the stream, and the butterfly with it, for he was bound fast to the leaf and could not get away. Heavens, how frightened poor Thumbelina was when the cockchafer flew up into the tree with her, but she was mostly grieved for the sake of the beautiful white butterfly, which she had bound fast, in case he could not free himself. He would be obliged to starve, but the cockchafer did not care about that. He sat down with her on the largest green leaf of the tree, and gave her the honey from the flowers to eat, and told her that she was very pretty, although she was not at all like a cockchafer. Later on, all the other cockchafers who lived in the tree came to pay a visit. They looked at Thumbelina and said, "She has not even more than 2 legs. That looks miserable." "She hasn't any feelers," said another. "She has such a narrow waist and looks quite human." how ugly she is, and said all the lady cockchafers. Yet Thumbelina was very pretty, and even the cockchafer who had carried her off admitted that. But when all the others said she was ugly, he at last believed it too, and would no longer have her. She might go where she liked. So they flew from off the tree with her, and put her up upon a daisy. She wept because she was so ugly that the cockchafers would not have her, and yet she was the loveliest little girl that one could imagine, as delicate and as tender as the most beautiful rose leaf. The whole summer through, poor Thumbelina lived alone in the great forest. She wove herself a bed of blades of grass, and hung it under a shamrock, in order to be protected from the rain. She gathered the honey out of the flowers for food, and drank of the dew that was on the leaves every morning. This way summer and autumn passed, but now came winter, the long cold winter. All the birds who sung so beautifully about her flew away. The trees became bare, and the flowers faded. The large shamrock under which she had lived dried up, and there remained nothing of it but a withered stalk. She was dreadfully cold, for her clothes were in tatters, and she herself was so small and delicate. Poor little Thumbelina, she would be frozen to death. It began to snow, and every snowflake that fell upon her was like a whole shovelful thrown upon us, for we are so tall, and she was only an inch long. So she wrapped herself in a dry leaf, but that tore in half and would not warm her. She was shivering with cold. Close to the wood to which she had now come lay a large cornfield, but the corn was gone long since, and only dry naked stubbles stood up out of the frozen ground. These were like a forest for her to wander through, and know how she was trembling with cold. In this state she reached the door of a field mouse, who occupied a hole under the corn stubbles. There the mouse lived comfortably, and had a whole room full of corn, a splendid kitchen and larder. Poor Thumbelina stood before the door like a little beggar girl, and asked for a piece of barley corn, for she had not a bit to eat for 2 days. "You poor little creature," said the field mouse, for she was really a good old mouse. "Come into my warm room and dine with me." Now, being pleased with Thumbelina, she said, "If you like, you can stay with me the whole winter, but you must keep my room clean and neat, and tell me tales, for I am very fond of them." And Thumbelina did what the good old field mouse wished, and in return was treated uncommonly well. "Now we shall soon have a visit," said the field mouse. "My neighbor is in the habit of visiting me once a week. He's even better off than I am. Has large rooms and wears a beautiful black velvety fur. If you could only get him for a husband, you would be well provided for, but he cannot see. You must tell him the prettiest stories that you know."